Okay, we're going to make salsa. For salsa we need 4 tomatoes, half of a red pepper, half of an onion. We just need the leaves of the celery. We need 2 tablespoons of leaves, 3 sprigs of cilantro, 1 jalapeno, 1 garlic clove, a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of chili, half a teaspoon of onion powder, and a 1/4 teaspoon of cumin. So, the way we go about this is we're going to take our vegetables, our tomatoes, our red pepper, and our onion. I'm going to set everything else aside. And I'm going to chop up half of each of these. 2 of the tomatoes. I'm going to set aside 2 of the tomatoes. I only need half of a red onion anyway. And this is a large one, so that's going to be a lot. And if your salsa, if you're going to keep it for a long time, you may want to reduce the amount of onion also, because over time sitting in the fridge it's going to get even more oniony tasting, so you may only want 1/4 of an onion if you think it may last for over a week or 2 in the fridge. But if you're going to use it within a week, half an onion. And we just need half a red pepper. So I'll set those aside. Now, so we had 4 tomatoes, 2 we set aside, half of the red onion we set aside, and half of the red pepper we set aside. So, I'm going to take out the seeds of the red pepper. These vegetables that we have left on here, I'm going to hand chop them all fine so that we have chunks of vegetable in our salsa. And the rest of the ingredients I'm going to put all together in the food processor, and it's going to process it more chunky. So we're going to have some that's kind of cut up and fine, and some that's processed, and it'll just make it thick and good and a nice texture when you're eating it. Sometimes if I'm in a real hurry and I'm making salsa, I'll actually take even this half and just kind of cube it into big chunks, put it in the food processor, and then just process it till it's chunky, put it in a bowl, and then I'll throw the rest of the ingredients in, process it till it's fine, and then mix them all together. And that works too. And it's quicker than this way, but I'm going to take the long way to show you the way I actually like it the most when I have time. So I have half my vegetables chopped up, and I'm going to put those in the bowl. Okay, so now I'm going to take the rest of my vegetables or ingredients and add them all to the food processor. That was really, the hardest part was chopping up the vegetables. And that's not even that hard, because if you don't want to, you can just really chunk them, put them in the processor, and let that do it for you too. Food processor is so great. These are all going to go in. To take the leaves of the cilantro off. Those go in. And 2 tablespoons of celery leaves. So I usually just go into the middle of the stalk and cut a piece off. This one has lots of leaves, but sometimes you just find them easier in the middle of the celery stalk. So that's all we need of the celery. This really adds a nice flavor to it. It's a little bit of an unusual flavor in it, but it's subtle. It's quite nice with the cilantro. Apple cider vinegar, 1 tablespoon. Also with your tomatoes, if you can get tomatoes that aren't as watery, it's best. Like the Roma tomatoes are good. These were vine ripened tomatoes. But sometimes you get them and there's a lot of water inside. And if that happens, I often will de-seed it first, or just kind of cut it in half, cut it in quarters, and pour the water out from the inside if it's a really watery tomato, because this salsa can be watery. If you have watery tomatoes, that's what's going to change it. Okay, so we have a teaspoon of salt. I'm going to add it to the food processor. Half a teaspoon of chili. Half a teaspoon of onion powder. And 1/4 of a teaspoon of cumin. That was half. Okay. 1 garlic clove. Which I'm going to chop just a little bit, just to make sure the food processor, just to make sure it's processed well in here. Some chunks of garlic. And I usually put a whole jalapeno in, but I'm going to put half of it in this time, because I want a mild salsa. And if you don't have jalapeno, you can always use cayenne too. Cayenne pepper, or chili pepper if you have, or cayenne, the powder. That's fine for heat. So this will be a mild salsa. Very easy. Okay, top goes on, and we're going to process it. I'm just going to push out some of the leaves that are stuck inside. Vegetables. See a little bit of water coming from the tomatoes. Before I add this, I'm just going to strain that little bit of water into the sink. just a tablespoon of water or two. But just to make it a thicker salsa, because that's the one thing with raw salsa is that sometimes it can be a little bit watery. So we just want it to be as little watery as possible. Mix it all together. That's it. And now we have a beautiful salsa. It's good if you let it sit for an hour or two and let the flavors marinate together, and then it'll be ready to serve. We're going to make nachos later, so this will be perfect with some guacamole and corn chips, and it's going to be delicious. That's it. Delicious raw salsa.